If you had looked at the family photo hanging on our fridge when I was 15, you probably would have thought we were one of those happy, picture-perfect families. The kind that spent weekends hiking together, laughed over homemade pancakes every Sunday morning, and actually enjoyed being around each other. Right in the middle of that picture was my mom, smiling like everything in the world was exactly the way it should be. Her hands rested gently on my shoulders, and back then I was still her only child, the first attempt, the practice run, I guess. We even wore matching denim jackets that day, and I remember convincing myself that maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to get better. But if you looked a little closer, you'd notice something didn't quite fit. I was squinting because the sun was in my eyes, while my mom stared straight into the camera with this determined expression, almost like she was trying to prove something instead of enjoying the moment. I was standing in the picture, sure, but somehow I wasn't really part of it. Looking back now, that pretty much sums up my entire childhood. My name is Nolan, and for a long time I believed I had a place in my mom's life. Maybe I wasn't the main character, but I figured I still mattered. I thought I had a dependable role, like a supporting character who would always be there. Then one day the whole story changed, and it felt like someone had erased me from the script. The changes didn't happen overnight. At first, she still acted like a regular mom in all the familiar ways. She cooked dinner a few nights every week, reminded me to finish my homework, and yelled when I forgot to pull the chicken out of the freezer before she got home. Then, sometime around my 16th birthday, everything started shifting. She met a guy named Damien at some self-growth retreat for entrepreneurs. I always joked that it was really just a summer camp for divorced people with oversized egos. After that trip, she came back glowing. She bought a whole new wardrobe, acted like she had discovered herself, and suddenly every other sentence included her new favorite word, *manifest star. Damien rolled into our lives driving a spotless Lexus with a Bluetooth headset that looked like it had become part of his head. He smiled constantly, but every compliment somehow managed to feel like an insult. The first thing he ever said to me was, "So you're the kid. You're taller than I expected." "Thanks," I answered, not really knowing what else to say. Damien also had a son named Mason. He was my age, but if I had to describe his personality, I'd compare it to one of those expensive subscription boxes. Fancy, predictable, and promoted like it was the greatest thing ever. The first time Mason came over, he brought a drone with him and called me bro, at least 8 times in the first 10 minutes. My mom laughed at practically everything he said. She looked at him like he'd already won an audition for a role she'd decided belonged to him. That summer was where everything really started falling apart. Damien slowly stopped being an occasional guest and practically moved in. Before long, his cologne sat on the bathroom counter like it belonged there. Our pantry filled up with his keto snacks. My room even got repainted because, according to my mom, they wanted to neutralize the vibe. Meanwhile, Mason's belongings slowly took over the guest room, which, by the way, was already bigger than my bedroom. I still remember the day my mom told me it was time to buy my own groceries because it was an important life skill. I was 16 years old. A week later, she handed Mason a credit card for emergencies and smiled at him. "Don't worry," she said. "You're family now." I actually laughed because I thought she had to be joking. She wasn't. Even after that, I stayed. I kept trying. I even helped Mason build a stand for his drone and pretended I didn't hear him call me the other kid while talking to his friends on FaceTime. Then my 17th birthday came. There wasn't a cake. There wasn't dinner. There wasn't even a present. The only thing I got was a group text from my mom. "Happy birthday, Nolan. Hope today brings you clarity and growth, seedling." Clarity. She definitely got that part right. I didn't argue that night. I didn't complain or make a scene. Instead, I sat alone on the back porch with a cupcake from a gas station, trying to convince myself it didn't matter. I kept telling myself maybe birthdays just weren't a big deal anymore. Maybe this was simply what growing up looked like. But deep down I knew the truth. That was the night something inside me started getting smaller. The weeks after that felt painfully quiet, and not the peaceful kind of quiet. I became almost invisible around the house. Damien grew louder. Mason acted more and more like he owned the place. And my mom? Around them she became warm, patient, and gentle. Around me she became cold, irritated, and distant. It was like I had turned into static that kept interrupting the new life she wanted. One day I asked if we could spend an evening together like we used to. Maybe we could catch a movie or cook her old spaghetti recipe instead of that zucchini noodle version Damien liked. She smiled. Not a kind smile. The kind that makes your stomach sink before the words even come out. "Nolan," she said softly, "I have a new family now. You'll understand when you're older." Those words hit me so hard it felt like someone had shoved a brick into my throat. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there staring at her, blinking over and over, trying to understand how she could say something like that as casually as if she were reminding me about dinner plans. My new family. Like I was just an unfinished draft she decided to throw away. The night I left wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors, no screaming matches, no suitcase rolling down the driveway. I packed one backpack, grabbed my favorite hoodie, checked my phone, which had 17% battery left, and left a note on the kitchen counter. Asterisk, didn't want to interrupt dinner. Asterisk, I'll be out for a bit. Asterisk, they never asked where I went. Honestly, I never expected them to. I caught a bus across town and showed up at my friend Caleb's house with absolutely no plan. The only thing I carried with me was this hollow feeling that had nothing to do with food. It was the kind of hunger you get when you suddenly realize you don't have a place to belong anymore. Caleb opened the door, blinked a couple of times, and frowned. "Dude, you okay?" I looked at him and asked, "You got room on the couch?" That was it. He didn't ask questions. He just slid the pizza box out of the way, tossed me a blanket that smelled like barbecue chips and his dog, and told me to make myself comfortable. I curled up in that corner of the couch like it belonged to me, even though I knew it really didn't. That couch became my home for the next 5 weeks. Caleb's parents were too exhausted to pay much attention. His dad worked overnight shifts, and his mom ran a small nail business out of their garage. They probably figured I was just hanging around for a while. Maybe they understood what was really happening. Maybe they didn't. Either way, I stayed out of everyone's way. I washed my own dishes, cleaned up after myself, and never stayed in the shower long enough to waste their hot water. At school, I acted like everything was completely normal. I still showed up every morning. I turned in my homework. I nodded politely when teachers talked to me. Whenever someone said, "Tell your mom I said hello," I'd smile and answer with a lie. "She's doing great." Late at night, I'd scroll through Instagram and see pictures of my mom and Damien drinking wine at tastings. Mason would post photos showing off expensive new headphones with captions like, "Asterisk thanks. Fam asterisk." Every time I saw those posts, I wondered if anyone in that house had even noticed it was quieter without me there. Still, I never called. I never texted. Not because I wanted to prove a point. I was simply exhausted. I was tired of chasing a version of love that kept moving farther away every time I thought I'd reached it. By the 3rd week, I found a job washing dishes at a 24-hour diner. Caleb's cousin knew the manager, so he got me in. The job paid cash under the table, and the uniform smelled like melted cheese, old grease, and regret. I accepted it without thinking twice. When you're 17, broke, and trying to survive, pride isn't something you can afford. My shift ran from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. After work, I'd crash on Caleb's couch for a quick nap, change into my school clothes in the bathroom, and spend the day fighting to stay awake through algebra by pretending any of those numbers actually mattered. Every dollar I earned went into an old shoebox. I wasn't saving for some dream. I was just trying to put a little more distance between myself and complete disaster. Eventually, I rented a tiny storage unit. It was one of those places with a keypad that barely recognized your code and a rusty metal door that screeched loud enough to announce your business to everyone nearby. The unit wasn't much bigger than a walk-in closet, and it cost me $70 every month. Still, it became the only place that felt like mine. Inside, I kept everything I still owned. My books, my clothes, an old broken laptop, and the faded blanket I'd had ever since I was 6 years old. That little storage unit held more than my belongings. It held me together. About a month after I moved in with Caleb, he went to bed early one night. I sat on the back steps outside his house with a cheap energy drink in my hand, staring at the cracked screen of my phone. I found myself scrolling through old messages from my mom. Asterisk, proud of you. Asterisk, asterisk, you're the best thing I ever did. Asterisk, asterisk, love you always, baby. Asterisk. Reading those texts felt like someone had set up a cruel joke years in advance. For about 12 seconds, I actually thought about texting her. Just one simple message. Asterisk, hey. Asterisk. No anger. No blame. No speech about everything she'd done. Just one tiny thread to see if there was anything left to hold on to. But I never sent it. I already knew exactly how that conversation would go. She'd answer politely, explain everything away as unfortunate circumstances, and somehow turn it into another lesson about how everyone has to grow up eventually. I wasn't interested. That night, I never fell asleep. Instead, I sat there watching the stars appear through the ripped screen door behind me while the wind shook a loose gutter overhead. Somewhere during those quiet hours, something finally clicked. I wasn't homeless. I was just between homes, between families, between being someone's son and figuring out how to become my own person. At the time, it didn't feel brave. It just felt true. And somehow that was enough. People make a big deal about turning 18, but when you've already been taking care of yourself, it really isn't some magical milestone. Nothing suddenly changes. Nobody throws confetti. You don't wake up with instant wisdom downloaded into your brain. You just realize you're legally old enough to vote, buy a lottery ticket, and pay rent you can barely afford. I spent my 18th birthday scrubbing burnt eggs off a skillet that looked big enough to change a truck tire on. The cook looked over at me, yelled, "Happy birthday, dishwasher," and slid an extra stack of pancakes across the counter with whipped cream piled on top. That was my birthday gift. I carried the plate into the alley behind the diner and ate it alone while a raccoon sat a few feet away watching me like it was questioning every decision I'd ever made. No candles. No presents. No phone calls. Just me. And one very judgmental raccoon. By then, I had finally moved out of Caleb's place. I rented a tiny room in a 4-bedroom house with 3 roommates who apparently believed doing dishes meant stacking dirty plates in the sink until they looked like modern art. The room itself was barely bigger than a parking space. The mattress had mysterious stains. The bedroom door didn't even lock, and the walls were thin enough to hear everyone's conversations. Still, it was mine. I paid the rent by working a stockroom job at a discount electronics store. Minimum wage. No benefits. But at least the building had air conditioning and a lot fewer rodents than the diner. I still picked up dishwashing shifts on weekends whenever they needed extra help. Between both jobs, I usually worked somewhere around 45 to 50 hours every week. I never really talked about it. Not because I wanted people to think I was tough. I just didn't have anyone I felt like telling. Every now and then I'd scroll through social media and see classmates posting college acceptance letters. Pictures from family brunches before they left for school. Parents helping decorate dorm rooms with matching comforters and welcome baskets. Whenever I saw those photos, this empty feeling settled in my stomach. It wasn't exactly jealousy. It was more like absence. Like life had been handing everyone their future, and somehow mine got left sitting in the printer tray. Still, I refused to let that feeling swallow me. Instead, I built routines. Every morning started with a 6 o'clock gas station coffee. I kept a budget spreadsheet with different colors that basically measured how close I was to financial disaster. I taped a sticky note to my bathroom mirror that simply read, "Don't quit just because it sucks." Eventually, I enrolled in the local trade school to study welding. It felt practical, reliable, something that depended on my own effort instead of anyone else's promises. During enrollment, the admissions officer casually asked if my parents would be helping pay my tuition. I laughed. He didn't. Thanks to a small grant and a part-time schedule, I managed to get in. The only catch was staying current on every payment. That meant no vacations, no breaks, just work, school, sleep, repeat. I'd show up to class wearing steel-toe boots with grease stains on my shirt while other students spent breaks scrolling through TikTok. At first, I felt completely out of place. Then I realized something. Most of them went home every night to full refrigerators and parents asking how their day went. I went home to a frozen burrito that cost $1.50 and 3 roommates arguing over who unplugged the Wi-Fi again. Different lives. Same classroom. Still, I was surviving. That had to count for something. Some nights I'd lie awake on that miserable mattress listening to laughter coming from the living room and wonder what it would actually feel like to be missed. Not pitied. Not tolerated. Actually missed. My mom never wished me a happy birthday. She never called. She never even sent one of those lazy Facebook messages that says, * hope you're doing well. *. About a month later, though, she proudly posted a picture of Mason standing beside a brand new car. The caption read, * so proud of our boy. Can't wait to see all the amazing things he'll accomplish. * blue heart. #blessed. #new beginnings. 63 people liked it. 3 left fire emojis. I stared at that picture for almost a full minute before quietly closing the app and tossing my phone onto the bed. And in that moment, without anger or bitterness, I realized something. I wasn't going back. Not for Christmas. Not for birthdays. Not after I finally became successful. I wasn't interested in showing up years later just so my mom could cry happy tears and tell everyone she'd always believed in me. She had already made her choice. Now it was time to make mine. About 2 years after the last message I ever sent my mom, I bought my first real toolbox. Not one of those cheap plastic boxes that snap shut. A real one. Solid steel. Flat black. Heavy enough that you could probably anchor a boat with it. The kind of toolbox people buy when they're planning to build an actual career. I slowly filled it with tools that represented how far I'd come. Torque wrenches. Angle grinders. A cutting torch that would have seemed impossible back when all I owned was duct tape and blind optimism. I finished trade school without much celebration. There wasn't a graduation ceremony. No cap. No gown. Just a notification in the student portal that read, certification complete, welding and fabrication. I didn't even print it. I took a screenshot, saved it, and went back to work. Around that same time, I landed a full-time job at a welding shop owned by a guy named Grant. Grant had a rough voice, wore his hair in a ponytail, and honestly looked like the type of guy who yelled at birds for making too much noise. He didn't care about resumes. His entire interview sounded like this. Show up. Work hard. Don't be stupid. That was enough for me. The work was loud, hot, physically exhausting, but it was honest work, and every paycheck felt earned. 6 months later, I finally left the shared rental behind and moved into a tiny studio apartment near the shop. It was nothing fancy. Old linoleum floors. A refrigerator that groaned every time the compressor kicked on. A mattress sitting directly on the floor. But it was clean. It was quiet. Most importantly, it was mine. Life settled into a routine. Work, sleep, meal prep, spend a few evenings building welding projects on the side. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval anymore. I was simply trying to build a life that didn't make me dread waking up every morning. During all that time, I never heard a single word from my mom. No birthday messages. No random, hope you're doing well. Nothing. Just silence. It was like my life had been paused halfway through a sentence and she'd never bothered pressing play again. Then, on an ordinary Wednesday, the silence finally ended. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. A few minutes later, a voicemail came through. Nolan. It's your mom. I know it's been a long time. I was hoping we could talk. Something's come up. Her voice sounded exactly the same. Calm. Casual. Like she was calling to remind me to pick up milk from the grocery store. There wasn't an ounce of urgency. Not even the smallest apology. I didn't return the call. Not that day. Not the next one either. But curiosity has a way of wearing you down. Eventually I sent one short text. What's this about? Her answer showed up almost immediately. Her reply came back almost instantly. Can we meet in person? I could stop by sometime this week. ***. I agreed. Not because I wanted to do her a favor. I did it for myself. I wanted to look her in the eyes and let her see that I'd built a life without her. That Friday she showed up at my apartment wearing a tailored blazer and enough perfume to make it seem like she was on her way to some charity fundraiser instead of visiting her son. She didn't even wait to be invited inside. She walked past me like she still lived there. "Nice place," she said, looking around the apartment. "Very functional." "Thanks," I answered. "I built most of the furniture myself." She gave a tight little smile. "Right? Welding." She nodded once. "That's good. Practical." I didn't offer her coffee. I didn't offer water. She sat down anyway. Then came the sigh, the carefully timed pause. The slight tilt of her head that I'd learned years ago always meant she was about to ask for something while pretending she wasn't. "I wanted to ask if you'd consider helping with Mason's college tuition." I blinked. So that was it. No catching up. No apology. No, "How have you been?" She jumped straight into the favor. "He's been accepted into a really promising business program," she continued. "Money's just a little tight right now." I stayed quiet. She took my silence as permission to keep talking. I thought, maybe this could be a chance for the two of you to reconnect. It would show you're still part of the family. I looked at her without saying a word. I let the silence grow until it became uncomfortable. Then I walked over to my workbench, picked up a folder, and placed it on the table between us. Inside were copies of every receipt and expense from the months I lived in her house. Back when Mason got Uber Eats delivered whenever he wanted, while I found sticky notes on the fridge that simply read, "Eat what's in the freezer." On the very first page, written in bold marker, was one line. "Back rent, $4,200. Due upon receipt." She stared at it, completely confused. "What is this?" "My invoice," I answered calmly. "You wanted help paying tuition?" I shrugged. "Great. Family helps family, right?" I tapped the paper. "So let's settle what you owe me first." Her face immediately hardened. Part disbelief, part offense. "This isn't funny, Nolan." "I'm not joking." Silence filled the room. After a few seconds, she stood up and straightened the sleeves of her blazer. "I see." She looked disappointed. "I honestly thought you'd grown up." I smiled. "I did." I glanced toward the folder. "That's why I keep records now." She didn't say another word. She walked straight to the door without looking back. She didn't even bother closing it behind her. I waited a moment, got up, and quietly pushed it shut. Then I poured myself a glass of water, sat down on the edge of my bed, and let out one long, slow breath. It wasn't relief from anger. I'd let go of that a long time ago. What I was finally releasing was hope. Hope that she'd someday become the mother I'd spent years waiting for. She wasn't coming back as the person I wanted. And for the first time, I stopped waiting. That night's sleep barely came. Not because I was upset. That feeling had burned itself out years earlier. My mind just kept replaying the look on her face after I handed her the invoice. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was confusion. Real confusion. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why I wasn't still revolving around her. Grateful for whatever scraps of attention she decided to throw my way. Seeing that expression answered a question I'd carried around for years. For so long I'd imagined a different ending. I'd pictured her showing up at my door with tears in her eyes, admitting she'd failed me. I imagined us hugging until all those missing years somehow disappeared. I even imagined us laughing together over burned pancakes and making jokes about Mason needing supervision every time he tried to assemble IKEA furniture. But that fantasy was finally over. She hadn't simply walked away. She had chosen not to look back. I wasn't the unfinished chapter she'd eventually return to. I was the file she'd permanently deleted. Strangely enough, that realization didn't destroy me. It gave me peace. Because I finally understood my life didn't need her approval anymore. The next morning I went to work like any other day. I welded a security gate for a neighborhood gym, repaired a trailer hitch, drank another cup of gas station coffee that somehow tasted equally like motor oil and freedom. Grant noticed the dark circles under my eyes when I clocked in 5 minutes early. "Overachiever today?" he grumbled. "Just trying to stay ahead of my voicemail," I said. He snorted. Fair enough. At lunch I checked my phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. While scrolling through old photos, I stopped on one from years before. It was me and Caleb sitting on his porch, eating instant ramen straight out of the pot. Honestly, we looked like two raccoons drowning in student debt. I laughed. That old couch. The broken kitchen sink. Caleb's awkward half-hugs. Those memories had carried me through. Not DNA. Not blood. Just determination. Borrowed blankets. And friends who never once questioned why I always needed the last slice of pizza more than they did. That weekend, another opportunity came my way. A fabrication shop nearby had found my welding projects on Instagram and wanted help with a custom build. Someone there had told them I worked hard and kept my mouth shut. Both statements were accurate. I accepted the project. Over the next few weeks, I designed custom steel stair railings for a modern cabin outside the city. The work required precision, patience, a little creativity. One evening, I finished welding the first section, stepped back, and really looked at what I'd built. For the first time in years, I felt genuine pride. Not the kind you fake because you're hoping someone notices. Not the kind you perform for approval. Just quiet satisfaction that belonged entirely to me. Later that same week, a Facebook message popped up. It was from Mason. I hadn't heard a word from him since I left home. His profile picture was a heavily filtered selfie, and his bio was full of lines about building a legacy and hustling harder than everyone else. I almost ignored the message. Curiosity won. It read, "Hey man, sorry things turned out the way they did. No hard feelings. I was wondering if your shop is hiring." I stared at it for a while. Then I opened my photos, found the picture of the rent invoice I'd handed our mom, attached it to my reply, and wrote one sentence. "Ask her to pay this first. Then I blocked him. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I was finished being the quiet guy everyone expected to clean up after them. I wasn't anyone's backup option anymore. I had become my own first choice. Starting your own welding business sounds exciting when people talk about it online. Social media makes it look like endless espresso, brainstorming sessions, and cinematic warehouse videos. The reality looked very different. It was just me. A cheap folding table tucked into the back corner of Grant's storage room. A Home Depot credit card that practically wheezed every time I swiped it. I named the business East Steel Fabrication. Not because it sounded impressive. Simply because I lived on East Maple Street and was too exhausted to come up with anything more creative. The first version of my logo was literally drawn with my finger on my cracked phone screen. I printed it at the public library. The ink smeared. I taped it to the shop door anyway like I was launching the next SpaceX. Grant rented me half of the storage room. His only condition was simple. As long as I don't hear you whining. That was basically his way of saying I could do whatever I wanted as long as my spark stayed away from his toolbox. For a while I worked every single day. Monday through Friday I worked for Grant. Weekends and evenings belonged to East Steel. The early jobs were small. Railings, bike racks, one steel bench for a woman who wanted her backyard to look post-apocalyptic chic. I took every project that came my way. Nothing was beneath me. If someone wanted a mailbox welded to look like a dragon, I was their guy. If they paid cash and that money covered rent plus enough ramen to survive another week, I thanked them and got to work. I posted every finished project on Instagram. At first my audience was almost non-existent. 5 followers. Me, Caleb, 2 obvious bots, and 1 random girl who clearly thought I was somebody else. Little by little, though, things started changing. Caleb's cousin ordered a custom fire pit. A barista downtown shared pictures of it on her story. Then a small design blog reposted those photos. And suddenly, everything started moving. One day I got 5 different inquiries in a single afternoon. I almost cried right into my work gloves. Almost. Instead, I bought a better pair of gloves and put every extra dollar back into the business. No expensive sneakers. No newer truck. No flashy purchases. Just better tools, stronger clamps, and a used welder that threw sparks like it had a personal grudge against me. I named it Beast. Eventually, I upgraded from that cramped corner in Grant's shop to a rented garage. It had real workspace, decent ventilation, a utility sink that didn't sound like it was on life support every time I turned the faucet. The first thing I hung on the wall was my very first paid invoice. Right beside it, I taped an old picture of me and Caleb from the couch days. We were sitting on his porch eating instant ramen straight out of the pot with a screwdriver because we'd somehow managed to lose every single fork in the house. That photo reminded me where I came from. It reminded me not to get comfortable. Most of all, it reminded me who shared a meal with me when nobody else even noticed I was hungry. One afternoon, I was installing a custom staircase railing at a lake house when my phone started buzzing. Unknown number. I ignored it. A few seconds later, it rang again. Another voicemail. I listened to it later that evening. It was my mom. Her voice sounded exactly the same. "Nolan, I heard you started some kind of fabrication business. That's wonderful. Listen, things have been a little difficult lately. Damien's dealing with some legal issues, and Mason's program isn't really working out. I was hoping maybe we could have dinner sometime. Family should stick together. You know, family." There it was again. That word. *family. She said it like she'd just rediscovered it after forgetting it existed for years. I never answered. The strange thing was, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was simply finished. That evening I made myself an actual dinner. Real steak, fresh vegetables, mashed potatoes, not another frozen meal heated in a flimsy plastic container. I sat alone at my own kitchen table with a glass of cheap red wine and let the silence settle around me. Years earlier I'd sat on Caleb's back steps eating cold ramen and pretending it tasted better than it did. The silence back then had felt empty. This silence felt different. This one felt earned. It wasn't loneliness anymore. Felt like finally arriving somewhere. I didn't need anyone cheering for me. I didn't need my mom clapping because I turned out okay. I already had everything I needed. A business. A name people respected. A place that belonged to me. Nobody could take that away. The next invitation didn't even come as a personal message. It showed up inside an old group chat called Family Updates. I hadn't even realized I was still in it. The message right before the invitation was a blurry picture of Mason standing beside a birthday cake with candles shaped like the number 25. My mom had captioned it, "So proud of this young man. Can't wait to see what this year brings." Two champagne glass emojis. A blue heart. Then came the next message. "Hi everyone. We're having a family dinner this Sunday to celebrate Damien's early retirement. Hope you can all make it. Let us know if you're bringing a +1. I stared at the screen for almost a minute. No one addressed me directly. "No, hope you can come, Nolan." Just another announcement dropped into a group chat where I'd basically become invisible years ago. I didn't reply. I didn't react. But I didn't leave the group either. Something about the timing felt deliberate. Maybe they wanted to see whether I'd show up. Maybe they wanted an audience. Damien was retired. Mason was still pretending to have everything figured out. And apparently I was the successful relative who might arrive with a date instead of smelling like welding smoke. I didn't have a +1. What I had instead was a full work schedule. And healthy boundaries. Sunday finally arrived. I finished installing a custom balcony railing for a client downtown. They paid the invoice in full and even tipped me with a bottle of scotch I couldn't pronounce. Back home I took a long shower, put on clean jeans that didn't smell like steel dust, buttoned up a plain black shirt, and headed out. Nothing expensive. Nothing flashy. Just clean. At exactly 6:30 that evening I pulled into my mom's driveway driving my company van. Freshly washed. Bright logo. East Steel Fabrication stretched across the side in bold lettering, complete with my phone number and a logo that no longer smeared when it got wet. The driveway was already full. Damien's Lexus, a BMW, Mason's newest leased car. I parked my van directly behind Damien's favorite truck. Close enough that backing out later might make him sweat a little. Walking inside felt like stepping into someone's perfectly curated Instagram post. Charcuterie boards, matching napkins, soft jazz playing in the background. Mason loudly explaining something about market pivots and business opportunities. The moment my mom saw me, her face brightened a little too quickly, almost like she'd rehearsed it. "Nolan, I wasn't sure you'd actually come." "Neither was I answered as I walked past her toward the kitchen. I wasn't rude. I was simply precise. Damien nodded at me. Mason waved enthusiastically, acting like we'd spent summers growing up together. I fixed myself a plate and sat across from an aunt I barely recognized. She smiled politely. "So I hear you've been doing metal work." She paused. "Is it art or plumbing?" "Welding," I said. "Custom fabrication. Railings, gates, commercial projects." I shrugged. "Business is going well." She blinked. "Oh, so, an actual business." I smiled. "Real enough to hire your son's law firm to write my contracts." Across the table, I noticed Mason glance in my direction. He understood exactly what that meant. The conversation changed after that. People asked polite questions. I gave polite answers. I skipped the wine. Mostly I just watched. Everyone carefully avoided mentioning that I hadn't become the failure they expected. They also couldn't figure out why I wasn't angry. When dessert arrived, a huge cake decorated with cheers to Damien. My mom tapped her fork against her glass. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she said. "Family means everything, especially the people who stay together through thick and thin." I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't react. While everyone applauded, I quietly reached into my pocket for my keys. "I've got an early installation tomorrow," I said. "Thanks for dinner." Before anyone had a chance to answer, I started walking toward the door. Behind me, Mason called out, "Hey man, need help with anything?" I turned around smiling. "Actually, yeah." He looked hopeful. "Could you move your BMW back about 6 feet? I nodded toward the driveway. "My van doesn't like backing downhill." His smile twitched. Mine didn't. I walked outside, climbed into my van, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt clear. The next morning my phone buzzed. Not first thing. Late enough that it almost seemed planned. Blocked number. I ignored it. A minute later it rang again. Another voicemail. This time I let it sit while I finished breakfast. My work boots were already laced. Today's job file sat open beside my eggs. I had an installation nearly 30 miles away. I didn't have time for emotional detours. Eventually curiosity won again. I pressed play. "Nolan, it's Mom." Her voice sounded softer this time, almost gentle. "I was really glad you came last night." She paused. "I know things haven't always been easy between us." Another pause. "I just hope maybe we can move forward. Start over. You're doing really well. I'm proud of you." "We all are." Still no apology. Not one word about abandoning me when I was 17. Not one acknowledgement of everything that happened. Just a warm blanket of carefully chosen words spread over years of silence. As though speaking kindly now could somehow erase motel rooms, ramen dinners, and the fact that she let me disappear without ever looking for me. I didn't answer immediately. Later that afternoon I was sitting in my work van behind a client's apartment building eating lunch. I opened my invoices folder. Then I created a brand new document. Emotional damages, 2011 to present. I started typing. Line item 1 * back rent. $4, 200. Line item 2 * 5 forgotten birthdays. $500. Line item 3 * couch years trauma fee. $1, 300. Line item 4 * tuition request, denied. See attached. Line item 5 * BMW parking clearance fee. $100. Subtotal * $6, 100. At the bottom I added one final note. Payment accepted in gratitude, humility, or homemade baked goods. Although honestly you're a little late for all three. I took a screenshot, sent it to her, then followed it with one short message. "Nice seeing you. Just settling the accounts." After that I blocked the number. Then I put my phone away and went back to work, because my life wasn't waiting for her anymore. It belonged to me. I had earned every piece of it, not inherited it, not been given it. I built it myself, and I paid every last cent of the price with interest.